Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Equitable Place-Based Health and Care theme, known from now on as EPIC, because it's too much of a mouthful for me. My name's Hilary Garrett, and I'm the Public Advisor co-lead for the theme. And much as with everything today, we are focusing on equity in health, and we're going to be looking at the EPIC theme through that lens of health equity. We're going to start off with a presentation from Catherine Walsh, who is the professor who is the lead of EPIC theme. Before I do that, can we just, a bit of housekeeping, make sure everybody keeps the mics off, and unless you're speaking, obviously, and any questions or comments or observations, please put them in the chat. So first off, we'll go over to Professor Catherine Walsh for her presentation, which is going to be a look at the EPIC approach through this equity lens. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks very much, Hilary. So I'm just going to sort of ground some of the presentations that follow by looking at and reviewing again the core issues associated with our theme, which are essentially encapsulated, as Hilary's just said, in the name of the theme, thinking about equity and thinking about place. So I'm just going to remind us of why the place-based approach is so important. And I'm going to refer here to some of the information from the place-based approach document that was published, and well, in fact, updated only in September. So thinking about why we might want to think about a place-based approach. So just as a reminder, oh, it's gone back up. You know, the gap in life expectancy in England is growing. And females in the most deprived parts of the country experience a decline in life expectancy. But of course, health is not just about the length of our life, but the quality of the life. And we can see that the gap in healthy life expectancy, years lived in good health, between the most and the least deprived areas of England was 19 years for both males and females, from 2014 to 2016. I find that quite a shocking statistic. It's also costly. Money, of course, isn't why we do necessarily what we do. But of course, you know, the NHS is under extreme pressure at the moment, and the costs to the NHS of health inequalities have been estimated as 4.8 billion a year from the greater use of hospitals by people in deprived areas alone. And clearly, hospital-based care is not the only type of care that people are accessing. And we also know that health inequalities reduce employment and productivity, which has a cost for both national and local economies. So just a reminder of why we do what we do and why it's so important. If we look at the system map of the causes of health inequality, and again, this comes from the report that I was just talking about, you can see that there are some individual factors that might be at play there. But so many of these determinants of health inequalities are actually place-based determinants. Let's not forget that where we live or the communities we occupy, and I don't just mean geographical communities, and I'll mention that earlier, actually has a huge impact on our health. So with things like employment, about our housing, about the natural and built environment. These are all examples of some of the areas where the place-based approach and the intersection, the really important intersection between the behaviour of individuals and how that is shaped by the places they occupy, using place in a very broad sense here. So people don't have the same opportunities to be healthy. I have to recognise the privilege that I have that enables me to be as healthy as possible. I'm white. I live in a very leafy middle class area. I have good access to healthcare. I understand the healthcare systems and I'm able to take advantage of that. Laughingly, someone said yesterday that I'm the cause of the lateral flow shortage because I've got 3 or 4 boxes sitting here because in anticipation of this change in policy, I ordered some boxes to be here. I know I'm using my advantage and my understanding of those systems to enable access to healthcare that isn't necessarily possible for everybody. And we know that interventions that rely solely on individual behaviour change are likely to widen inequality because there is this complex causal pathway. And let's remember that those intersections are what is critically important. So again, in the report, they talk about the components of the population intervention triangle. And here you can see there are service-based, community-centred and civic level interventions that all have an impact on that place-based planning. So again, place is critically important, and that's why we have an equitable place-based healthcare theme. We have a research focus, and again, remember, and we've been reminded of that already this morning, that our focus is research to support place-based approaches to address these health inequalities. And our vision is to support those legal systems aiming to integrate health and care so that they're able to operate more responsively. Just a reminder that place could be that specific geography, but it could be a particular setting, such as a prison or a school. We are all influenced by a number of places that we occupy. We're looking at some of those social determinants of health, which I've already mentioned, which might include their environment, the education, our housing, a reminder that is far more than just those individual lifestyle behaviours. What's important in terms of us enacting this is the collaborations that we undertake. And there is a real focus, and we'll be talking about this later in our sessions, on those collaborations and valuing that partnership working. We don't just perhaps need to understand local systems, but we need to be integrated with those local systems so that people within those systems feel that they have a voice and a share and are partners in the work that we're doing. It's never going to be doing for, it's going to be alongside and with. And finally, just to focus that those local people and those communities, because although we're talking about place, let's not forget that the key components of those places are the people who live or work within those places. So it's working alongside people as ever to support those improvements to population health. And I think you'll see some of those key principles that I've just talked through in some of the projects that my colleagues are going to share and update you on now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Well, everyone, I think that was a really good, clear overview of EPIC. And we're now going over for 3 short presentations, highlighting some of the equity-focused work we're undertaking within the theme. First off, it's going to be Kosa Khan, who will be talking to us about social prescribing and health inequalities, followed by Dr. Emma Halliday, who will be giving us a presentation entitled VCFSE, Sector and Parity of Esteem in Integrated Care Systems. And then that will be followed up by Dr. Joanna Goldberg on challenges and opportunities around working responsively with non-academic member organisations. So thank you for bearing with us, and please don't forget to put comments and questions in the chat, and I'll hand over to Kosa.
Hi, my name is Kosa Khan. I'm one of the researchers that works within the Equitable Place-Based and Healthcare theme, and I'm going to talk to you briefly today about our work on social prescribing that has had a specific focus on health equity. Now, for those of you who have been to any of our theme meetings at previous ARCFEST, you will have heard about some of the detail of this project and our preliminary findings as well. But for those that maybe know less about the project, I'm just going to provide a quick overview. So the focus of our project was to explore the reach and impact of social prescribing on health inequalities. And we wanted to do this by looking at some of the existing service user data that was held by organisations delivering social prescribing. And we wanted to apply an equity lens to the data by considering who was accessing social prescribing, how they access, and what outcomes were being reported. And we not only wanted to pick up on the demographics such as gender or ethnicity, but also the wider determinants of health and any other relevant variables such as employment, or if somebody was a carer, or their housing status. And we wanted to consider if there were any differential impacts or any other variations across those three areas and within groups. So exploring whether some groups were overrepresented or underrepresented in the data, or had poorer or better outcomes than others. And I won't be getting into the detail of our findings today, as we've just produced a research bite that provides more information about the project and our key findings. The link will be posted in the chat, and we encourage you to have a read of this when you have time. But I would like to touch on some of the equity considerations that have arisen from this work and how the theme is building on these. One of the key findings from this project was that there were gaps in the data collection, particularly in relation to the factors that influence health equity, and we found that the wider determinants of health were not really being recorded. So we provided information in individual reports for the organisations that were involved in this project to consider how they can improve data collection, and we're also developing a 10-tip guide for organisations delivering social prescribing. This piece of work has also highlighted a broader issue beyond social prescribing and how we actually evidence the impacts of the services we deliver or commission on health inequalities if we're not actually collecting that type of data. So moving forward, we're thinking about our member organisations that we work with and how we can incorporate the learning into planned work. The project has also highlighted there's a considerable amount of data already being collected which could be better utilised. For example, for social prescribing, we know there is data held by organisations that deliver social prescribing, but also data held in primary care records and the EMIS system. And this was an area that was also picked up in our learning exchange that took place at the end of November, and focused on data collection through an equity lens. And we can share a video link where you can hear more about the presentations and discussions that took place. But one of the points raised was that there's a real opportunity of bringing together data from different sources, such as that held in the NHS, local authority, or third sector organisations, to tell a better story of impacts on health inequalities. We've started to have conversations with the CHI theme and how we might work with members to better utilise existing data and linking data sets to apply an equity lens. So through feedback from our stakeholders involved in the project, we've recognised our project focused on those who are already accessing social prescribing and the need to consider those who might not be taking up the offer of social prescribing and any equity factors that might be coming into play. We'll be conducting a small pilot study looking at a sample of practices in the North West Coast that will utilise data held by GPs on those that decline or take up the offer of social prescribing, and we're just waiting for NHS approval and hope to start the project early next year. And we're hoping that the pilot will feed into a research for patient benefit grant application early next year to increase the number of practices involved and further explore health equity in terms of what groups might be declining the offer of social prescribing and what might be contributing to this. We're also feeding into the national work being conducted by NHS England and NHS Improvement in the development of a minimum data standard for social prescribing that aims to standardise the data being collected, and there have been a number of opportunities for feedback on what data to collect, and these have been shared with public advisors and key stakeholders to ensure that the views from the North West Coast and the ARC are also considered. Some of our public advisors have also taken part in a focus group earlier this year looking at what members of the public what information from members of the public should be collected as part of social prescribing records. Finally, we're developing opportunities for collaborating on equity-focused research for social prescribing, on a linking in with the ARC Social Prescribing Research and Development Network, UCLAN Social Prescribing Unit, as well as the Wales School of Social Prescribing Research. We're developing a social wellbeing measure for social prescribing, which they plan to pilot with key stakeholders and members of the public, and it would be a great opportunity for our theme and ARC if we could actually get involved in this piece of work in helping ensure that we're collecting meaningful outcome measures for social prescribing. And that brings my presentation to an end. If you do have any questions or would like to discuss any of the points that I've mentioned today, please do contact me on the email address provided here. I've also provided the links to the resources below. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Emma Halliday. I'm a researcher based at Lancaster University, working with the EPIC theme. And in this short update, I'll talk about research activities we're undertaking focused on the role of the voluntary community, faith and social enterprise sector within integrated care settings. The rationale for this project stems from a growing attention at a national and local level to integrated care systems in general, and more specifically the role of the VCFSE sector within those systems as partners in decision-making and delivery of services. When we talk about integrated care, this broadly refers to the process of partnership structures that bring together local stakeholders, including the voluntary sector and groups and local communities, to redesign care, improve population health and address health inequalities through shared leadership and action. In considering this agenda, EPIC is interested in addressing questions such as those listed on this slide. So thinking about, for example, the purpose and role of the VCFSE sector and their contribution to integrated care approaches within health and care. And then related to that, what are the pathways to health improvements and reducing inequalities when integrated care approaches involve working with the VCFSE sector in partnership? And then thinking ahead, what are the research gaps and learning for policy and practice? We've been undertaking a number of different research and engagement activities. I won't detail these here. I've included a link at the end of the slides where you can find out more information and outputs that we've already developed. But just to briefly summarise, we've been undertaking case study research to explore local perspectives in one ICS in Lancashire and South Cumbria. And then with the impact team in ARC, we've been scoping existing evidence on integrated approaches such as published reports and case studies, and developing a logic model of integrated VCFSE approaches. And finally, we held a workshop over the summer with regional stakeholders and ARC researchers and public advisors to explore their views on these issues. So as equity is a theme running through the ARCFEST today, I would like to highlight two different ways we've been thinking about equity in this project. So the first way of thinking about equity relates to what Peter Armour, who's the chair of the VCFSE Alliance in Lancashire and South Cumbria ICS, describes as parity of esteem for the sector. So throughout our research, we've been exploring the ways in which the sector is working with their colleagues within health organisations to achieve a more equal partnership working arrangement, but also the challenges that this presents for the sector in being able to play a more significant role in the design and delivery of health and care. So some of the key issues that have been raised as challenges in this process have been issues such as a very clinically focused organisational culture, the time and capacity of individuals and VCFSE organisations to contribute, for example, to meetings or to development of activities within ICSs. Thirdly, the funding arrangements for the VCFSE sector is an issue particularly in relation to thinking about the commissioning arrangements, which can often create competition rather than collegiality. And then finally, across sectors, the need for skills and confidence to work in sort of new ways and recognise that the knowledge and attributes of different sectors bring to partnership working. And then the second consideration of equity relates to the ways in which actions and services designed and delivered by ICSs can be more equity sensitive through a partnership approach with the VCFSE sector. So firstly, through the evidence that we've looked at, this has highlighted different rationales for the ways in which VCFSE involvement can make integrated approaches more equity sensitive. So, for example, the sector's knowledge and expertise as long-standing providers of services, particularly in delivering services to those experiencing inequalities. Secondly, and related to that, is the relationships and connections that the sector has to communities of interest and communities of place, which may include groups with poorer health outcomes or those reluctant to access services. And then thirdly is the ways in which that the knowledge and experience of the VCFSE sector can contribute to the design and delivery of more holistic ways of working and thinking that address the wider social and economic needs of communities. But then, of course, are the potential as well for increasing inequalities or issues that are potentially some negative impacts. So one issue, for example, raised during our workshop was the risk that where the VCFSE sector becomes or is involved within ICSs, that they might risk becoming seen as a voice of the community and therefore a gatekeeper to community participation, which may constrain involvement of individuals and groups in decision making and priority setting. So just to conclude, just to highlight some next steps, there are some resources that we'll be developing and which will be available on the ARC website. But we'd also be interested in hearing from ARC members involved in testing out integrated approaches, which involve partnership with the VCFSE sector and which have a particular focus on improving population and health and addressing health inequalities, particularly to discuss whether there's interest in exploring opportunities for future research in this area. So just to conclude then, here are our contact details and the link for further information and resources about this project. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities about working responsively with our partner organisations to promote health equity through research. So this is quite a pragmatic presentation. So some of the challenges that we've got in terms of being responsive to the needs of our partnership organisations are around, I think, some of the time pressures that we have in academic and health research. We, tend to spend about 12 months at least developing funding applications, getting costings, going through ethics and HR and appointing staff, and all that adds up to quite a long period of time from developing an idea to actually taking part in the research and recruitment. There can be issues around workload and staffing, so recruiting in time to get the work started. We have the prioritisation system within the ARC that can also add to some of the time taken to get started. And we can collaborate based on the skills needs that we've got. So we have some real strengths here around the different themes, the ARC resources and the resources within our universities. So I'm going to talk about the way we've worked responsively within EPIC, some opportunities that we've had to promote health equity through carrying out research in a more sort of responsive way. And I'm going to talk about two examples here. It's going to be the ADA project with Blackpool Council and also the Lancashire Violence Reduction Network.
So both of these are place-based approaches around criminal justice and rehabilitation of offenders. So the ADA project takes a trauma-informed approach to drug and alcohol-related crime. There's a diagram to the side here that talks about the content of that programme. I'm going to talk less about the programmes themselves and more about this different way of working that we did. So what happened with the ADA, they needed some support quite quickly. They had got started on some work where they were involving some people with lived experience very closely in not only planning the research but also conducting it. And so they wanted some support around that. They'd also had an unsuccessful funding application. They weren't used to applying for funding for research and evaluation, so they needed some support around there. And they also wanted some support about actually conducting the analysis. So we provided support around repurposing a previously rejected funding application. That probably took, and just the reason why I'm going to tell you how long that took, just to give you an idea around how much sort of short-term resources this actually took. So that probably took a couple of hours to review an application online. We had one meeting around planning the research and analysis and talking about sort of the best way to do that and the best way to involve the people with the lived experience. We actually provided analysis training and support with the wider team and the people with the lived experience, and that took about an hour's worth of meetings. I delivered a presentation and then we had a chat afterwards. And we've also got this critical friend approach where we have regular quarterly meetings, plus if the team have any questions they can get in touch with us through ad hoc emails. So that was kind of we got that sort of sorted out probably within a couple of weeks of Ada first getting in touch with Paula. So that's kind of a more advice-based, supportive-based approach to working with a partner organisation. With the Lancashire Violence Reduction Network, they had an opportunity to apply for some Home Office funding around research and evaluation, and the Home Office imposed these quite tight deadlines. So the invitation to tender, invitation to quote was sent on the 21st of August 2021. That's when it landed in our inboxes. We completed and submitted the application by the 7th of September, and it was awarded on the 25th of October. The work commenced on the 1st of November. So that's around a 3-month turnaround from start to finish, or from start to start almost. So from start of the application and putting procedures in place to actually starting the research. So it's a slightly different model of working. Now, the facilitators for that were that Lancaster University are currently promoting a consultancy model via their employment recruitment service. So they've sort of piloting this in-house recruitment system where they have people signed up who are wanting to work on short-term projects, and we can draw on that research. We also drew on existing strengths and skills within the team and across the wider ARC. We had really helpful facilitative staff at Lancashire Constabulary who were helping us to develop the application and get things off the ground. And they also, we actually found this out after we'd actually completed the ITQ, they had a researcher already in residence who was employed by Lancaster University to facilitate information and data sharing with the LVRN team. So there was quite a few facilitative elements there to that work. And there was also, I think we all had a willingness to operate in a messy space, in a new space, and to sort of commit to trying to get something off the ground quite quickly. I think some of the opportunities to work in this way, as well as being able to promote health equity quite quickly. So for example, working with the ADA team to getting those people with lived experience upskilled so they felt more confident to become involved in the analysis of the data that they already had, is that some of these more responsive and seed corn small pieces of work can actually lead to the development of larger evaluations, applications for trials, and some, to develop some funding applications for research that can have a real impact on health equity. There are also opportunities to use the wider ARC and NIHR infrastructure. So, for example, some of the skills we already have in our North West Coast, the National ARC, to become involved with the COREN and the Research Design Service. They're there and they're, you know, quite able to respond quite quickly. And also to sort of build the relationships with our member organisations, as well as to consolidate the ARC North West Coast offer, and to show some real practical support based on the sort of pressures that our partner organisations are under outside of the academic environment. So a conclusion there is that the traditional academic health research model is not always responsive enough to these external pressures. I think the ARC remit to work with partner organisations means that we do need to be adaptable in order to support our members. I think there's some opportunities based on the new way of working around the COVID pandemic response, you know, some of these rapid response approaches, we might be able to draw on some of that learning and apply that within the ARC. However, there are some implications for work planning. So I think when we're planning our work within the team, we need to think about how some of our projects can perhaps, or some of the tasks can maybe be put on hold for a couple of weeks to be a bit more responsive to these time pressured tasks that we need to get through. So anybody wants any further information, we've got the EPIC Inquiries email address here, or you can also contact me direct if you want some more specific information. So thanks very much, and sorry about the glitches at the start.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Kosa and Emma. I have a whistle stop tour there, isn't there? Thanks, everybody. I think it's a good point to pause for a second. If there are any observations that people would want to offer, or any questions that anybody wants to bring up at this point, just take a breath and have a bit of time for that. Otherwise, we can obviously carry on with comments in the chat. Anybody got anything? Oh, I think Steph's waving at me there.
I'd just like to ask the question regarding the very first presentation from Kosa Khan on social prescribing and the working relationship with the voluntary sector organisations in the respect of the approach they adopt to work with the community, grassroots groups. Often voluntary sector organisations tend to come in quite top heavy, and if they've got pockets of funding available for communities or community interest companies, they tend to favour them more than the grassroots. And even working directly with social prescribing link workers, they tend to sort of divert referrals to support networks that aren't grassroots level and more business-minded approach, which is, to me, if the link is made and the connection needs to be made within the community, why divert around the community where that person would live and go elsewhere? Seems to me that there's a little bit of a disconnect there between the approach the voluntary sector organisations have, and they bring down support or training or opportunities, and they tend to favour CICs more than grassroots community groups in respect of the links made between social prescribing platforms. That's just an observation, I think.
Thank you, Steph, for that comment, and it's a very valuable comment. The piece of work that we were doing was focusing specifically around the information that the organisations were collecting, and that there was actually a gap around where people were being referred on to. So if we did have better data collection, maybe that's something that could identify where people are being referred on to and what type of services, whether it is grassroots organisations or if there are particular activities that people do then access through social prescribing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. Anybody else before we move on? Right, I'm taking that as a no. So I'd like to now introduce Paula Wheeler, who's the EPIC Theme Manager. And over to you, Paula.
Thank you. I won't have any glitches, hopefully, because I have had glitches and now I've got Dave at Lightworks organising my PowerPoint for me. Well, thanks very much, everyone. As Hillary's introduced me, my name's Paula Wheeler. I'm the Neighbourhood Coordinator and the EPIC Theme Manager in ARC. I think so basically I'm going to be talking about the current status of the COREN network, which is the Community Research and Engagement Network that's part of ARC and has transitioned from Clark. But I think just to pick up on Steph's point, I hope during my very short presentation now, Steph, you'll see some of the opportunities and the environment that we're looking to create in an applied research setting that hopefully will assuage some of your anxieties around that top-heavy VCFSE approach, possibly, is your view, and how we might further engage with members of the public in a community research and engagement that's representative of all the partners in local places. Next slide, please. So as I said, in a short session, I'd like to talk you through some of the background to the Community Research and Engagement Network, its transition from Clark to ARC. I'm going to touch on the structure and governance and the formation of a leadership group. I'll look at some of the early aims of the Community Research and Engagement Network, and I'll also briefly update on work planning and future activity. Next slide. So lots of you will be familiar with the COREN, the Community Research and Engagement Network, and it's fair to say that the COREN was an integral part of the Clark and its Neighbourhood Resilience Programme, which worked across 10 local authorities in the North West Coast from 2016 to 2019. We created through the Community Research and Engagement Network and the broader NRP, Neighbourhood Resilience Programme, a series of neighbourhoods for learning. And these were places which a systems approach to resilience was tested and developed. Within each neighbourhood for learning, there were key system players, including local authority, other statutory organisations, the VCFSE organisations, and the public. And they coalesced and were brought together to share knowledge, prioritise issues for action, and co-create solutions. Local VCFSE organisations were funded to resource what we called COREN facilitators in each neighbourhood for learning, and they were responsible for recruiting and supporting local people to get involved in the programme as what we called at the time resident advisors. The COREN within the Clark, it's fair to say, was a network of empowered organisations and communities with the enthusiasm, skills and confidence to co-produce externally funded research relevant to local needs, and it's this legacy that we're looking to build upon and strengthen with the Community Research Network in ARC. Next slide. So, currently in the ARC North West Coast, we are looking to develop a refreshed COREN that will harness and advance the learning gained and the relationships built through the Neighbourhood Resilience Programme. You'll see some of our principles here. We're looking to collaborate through the connection of place-based partners. We're looking to strengthen that collective community voice within applied research so that it has more power and it's more influential in some of those local decision-making processes. And equally important, I think, is elevating, as Joanna's alluded to, the profile of research, maybe in those organisations that aren't as research active and research ready as maybe some of our other academic partners may be. Next slide, please. So the structure and governance in Clark is such that we have 3 commissioned organisations. The COREN brings together key partners from across health and care and includes VCFSE and statutory organisations, as well as other stakeholders from across the North West Coast, including members of the public. So we have 3 commissioned organisations, and as I've said, they're place-based connectors with a knowledge of local communities and organisations that work within places. We have a leadership group that comprises, in addition with ARC staff, so I sit on the leadership group, as does our new stakeholder engagement manager, Claire, who started 2 weeks ago. We also have voluntary sector organisation representation from our 2 integrated care systems across the patch, one from Cheshire and Mersey and one from Lancashire and South Cumbria. Governance sits with our EPIC theme lead, and also we report monthly to our ARC management team. Next slide, please. The 3 commissioned organisations that we fund are, as it says on the slide, Liverpool CVS, Blackburn with Darwin Healthy Living Centre, and 4 housing associations. These organisations act as the COREN place-based connectors, as I've said, and take primary responsibility for key elements of the work programme, including the delivery of learning exchanges and the lead role for communicating and disseminating knowledge of local programmes across the ARC. These organisations were selected because of their long-standing relationship with Clark and the ARC. their expertise in community-focused place-based health and care research, and their connections in the wider health and care system in the North West Coast. In addition, as I've mentioned, we have public advisor representation on the group, as well as VCFSE reps. In addition, we're also looking to appoint a professional lead and are currently having conversations with public health colleagues in local government. Next slide, please. So what's our offer? The COREN's offering to provide a facilitated space for applied health and social care research conversations that are responsive to local needs and priorities. We're looking to encourage and facilitate the sharing of that information. We're looking to support the function of ARC infrastructure currently, such as research development networks, roundtables, connected research communities and the like. And we also want to provide that space that can respond to and direct emerging research ideas from staff and other academics at universities within our North West Coast. Next slide. Some of our impacts, I mean, what does success look like, and how do we think we will be doing what it says on the tin? So for us, our aspiration is for the COREN to be able to influence, have an increased influence, to shape research ideas and projects and contribute to external grants. We're also looking to create knowledge mobilisation and democratising that process so that everyone, as Steph's alluded to, has a voice in that decision-making process, and more importantly, potentially, access to grants and other funding. We want the COREN to have an impact internally too, and I think certainly with the transition and the change that's happening in health and care around place-based partnership formations, integrated care systems, the introduction of, a piece of policy around the health and care bill. I think within academic circles and within ARC primarily internally, we need to have a broader understanding about what that local system working is and how it has the potential to impact negatively and positively on our applied research programme. Next slide. So what next? As I've said, we've got a very new in post stakeholder and engagement manager in Claire. Over the next 3 months, next 100 days or so, we're looking to circulate a COREN survey that will be looking to elicit basically what's going on in our VCFSE sector. We'll be looking to see what routine data they collect, and we've had conversations in early themes about possible opportunities for data linkage. We're also interested to learn what research capacity they've already got, whether they're research active or not, and how that then can tap into some of the capacity building and opportunities that will manifest themselves across the whole of the ARC. We're going to convene another leadership group meeting, and then from February to March we're going to hold a series of learning exchange events that the commissioned organisations will be developing in-house and putting on for the whole of the COREN across the ARC. We're in conversations with the leadership group about a possible skill development offer. And again, that links to conversations we've already heard in the ARCFEST today about that research readiness. We have member organisations who may be less knowledgeable, maybe have less experience of being research ready, but are really keen. Is there some skill development offer that we can co-produce through the COREN to help support some of that research active wherewithal? We're also having conversations locally. It seems that networks and community practices are the way to go currently in our local health and care infrastructure. And we're currently having conversations with the Cheshire and Mersey newly formed Research Development Network and the Filed Research Network, both of whom are interested in where we each have our own USP around what we offer, but we can also elicit and have conversations about future opportunities for collaboration. Communication and dissemination is key to the establishment and the strengthening of this network, and we will be producing a quarterly COREN newsletter to keep people in the ARC and broader afield updated on opportunities for involvement and talking about things that we're doing. Next slide. So, bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I was conscious of the time. So I suppose some reflections before we break to the next session is how that people in this group feel that they can work with us in the COREN. What, more importantly, what assets do you have either with individually or within the organisations you work or might volunteer for, so that you can collaborate and building on this approach? And how, or do you think it has possible implications for how the ARC works and moves forward in the future? Claire's email is on the bottom of that slide, and I'm sure someone will post it in the chat too. Obviously, this is only like a 10-minute intro to where we think the COREN will move into ARC. If you want more information or you want to arrange a chat with us, then please get in touch. But I'd be interested in listening or hearing of any reflections. I can see people have commented in the chat, so I don't know whether you want to pick that up, Hilary. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, could I just very briefly, before we break up, open the floor to any contributions again, please? I know, Steph, you've posted something again in the chat. I don't know whether you wanted to come in there or not. Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I just think it all sounds very exciting moving forward for the COREN and new avenues of exploration. It sounds really interesting moving forward.
Thank you.
It's really good.
Can I just comment on something? I think that your comments are welcome, Steph, thanks. I think it's just to reiterate that although we're talking about the COREN within the EPIC theme meeting, the COREN is an ARC-wide resource. So in addition to absolutely, we want to strengthen our connections out with our member organisations, our public advisor forum, of course, our VCFSE sector colleagues. We're really interested in learning more about how our colleagues in other themes think they might collaborate and sort of work with us in creating that space. For me, I think it's around do once well and share. I think in the complex infrastructure that is ARC and even more complex health and care systems, I think it's really important that we don't duplicate. So hence the reason I mentioned in my slides around the opportunities for collaborations with other research networks out with a traditional applied research setting. So I think if you're involved or you know of anything that's doing a similar type of offer to broader system partners, then please get in touch. I think what we want to do is over time curate and have a specific USP around applied research, but recognising that the applied research we will be offering is quite often a traditional academic stance and comes from that particular perspective. And what we want to do is coalesce with others who might be doing different types of research around evaluation, implementation, that we can then reciprocate and equally support either in external grants for us to deliver on our objectives from the ARC, but more importantly build capacity with our local system partners about sort of things like evaluation and impact.
Thanks, Paula. Could I just also put somebody on the spot again? Claire, I see Claire Selby's here. Would you just like to just very quickly introduce yourself before we get whisked off into the ether?
I was about to actually do that, Hilary, so thank you. Yes, so I'm Claire Selby. As Paul has said, I am literally 2 weeks new in post, so I'm lots of learning, lots of introductory meetings with people. People have been really helpful with sharing their knowledge and skills so far, and I'm really looking forward to talking to more people. So I would reiterate that, say please do get in touch. If you I think, as Paula said, you know, there's so many people out there doing work that has synergies with the COREN, so it'd be great if anyone can send details of organisations they work with, individuals they think it'd be useful for me to speak to. Yeah, I'm just really keen to talk to as many people as possible at the moment. So yeah, really do just emphasise, please do get in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Well, thank you everybody for attending our theme get together today and an update using this lens of equity. And I am conscious that any moment we are liable to get whisked off to the next session. So I'd like to just wind up there unless anybody's got any other contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there may be a few more minutes before we get moved.
But... Oh, have we? Oh, right. Okay.
Just in case people are wondering. So if anybody does have anything they want to share, please do comment, post.
So we've posted the bites both in this internal chat here and in the broader feed loop chat. So if you've missed it and you leave the meeting, you've not cut and paste it, we've made them available, the research summary bites, in the other chat as well.